You're listening to High.
Welcome to High Human AI Interaction. We're very happy to have you on our second second podcast. And I'm super proud to be here with Victoria. And today we're going to talk about maybe a little bit about metacognition. No one knows what it is, but we're going to find out.
When Tom mentioned that he wanted to discuss metacognition and how AI could influence or impact metacognition, the first thing I had to do was go onto ChatGPT and ask it to define metacognition for me, which is probably defeating the object. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of talking about all things thinking about thinking, which is quite the tongue twister to say, I just wanted to draw your attention to something that happened to me this week. And I noticed, and I'm curious to know if you or if anyone listening has had a similar experience. So I was tinkering around with ChatGPT. I think it was in their O1 model, something like that. Please forgive me if I've called out the wrong model. But I noticed that the way that after I'd typed and I'd hit enter, the way it was then releasing the information back to me, the way it was displaying the text that was coming back to me, suddenly started slowing. And I thought, what's going on here? Is there like a weird lag or something? So what I did is I decided to question ChatGPT. And I was like, hey, so I've noticed that it feels as though the nature of the text that you're outputting to me is less deliberate. It's sort of, I don't know how to describe it. It was like there was almost a greater gradient effect coming with the type as it was being displayed in front of me. And I was like, why is that? Is that just like a new thing that you're doing? And what it came back to me and said, which I thought was really bizarre, was that this is a deliberate choice that is being made to respond to the way that it perceives me or the way that it deems me to communicate. So perhaps in some of the questions that I ask, they might be a bit more philosophical, or there might be some sort of more introspective nature. And so then the LLM came back to me and said, well, I want to convey a sense of me thinking about my words before I say them by slowing down and creating this like delay and lag in getting back to you. And I don't know what you think about that, but it kind of blew my mind a little bit.
My first immediate thought is going back to the kind of milestone moments of AI that we have been seeing over the last 20, 30 years. And one of those milestone moments was Kasparov being beaten by Deep Blue. If anyone who is like younger on this podcast is listening and doesn't know what Deep Blue is, it was at the time, was it IBM? Yeah, I think it was IBM's way of saying, we have been able to introduce a new level of artificial thinking, artificial intelligence. I don't even want to use that word, but effectively in the realm of chess, introduce a machine that is able to beat the reigning champion, which was Kasparov at the time. And why I associate what you say right now specifically with that moment was that in hindsight, Kasparov mentioned that part of the reason, one of the reasons why Deep Blue was able to beat him was that it appeared to do really hard thinking and come up with new strategies, because sometimes it paused before making a move. And afterwards, people found out that the guys at IBM actually programmed Deep Blue to not respond immediately, to create additional psychological pressure on him. So basically what this means is there might have been some, calculations. Obviously, the algorithms of a chess computer, they now seem trivial. Obviously, we could talk about other AI milestones like AlphaGo or IBM Watson. But the question is, are we talking about thinking when we talk about LLMs and ChatGPT pausing, or are we talking about a deliberate strategy to make it appear that it is thinking? Because if it is like pausing for 300 milliseconds, is it actually thinking for 300 milliseconds, or is it thinking in the same speed it is thinking and just making the thinking appear more thoughtful?
There's so much to unpack there. And even when you think about the notion of wanting to convey a sense of thinking, it immediately springs to mind, and I'm sure it shouldn't do this, but I get this almost like inherent like shudder, because I think that it feels kind of nefarious in a way. It's like I'm here to try and convey something to you. I'm here to make you think, to make you feel like I'm really taking on board the things you're saying, like I'm listening to you, like I'm articulating a response that's bespoke to what's going on. Or in the chess sense, it would be I'm doing it to create maybe a sense of tension and suspense, and to let you think that my next move isn't just a knee-jerk reaction. It's thoroughly considered. With ChatGPT, I actually found the experience quite unnerving. I thought when it started coming back to me to say, and it explicitly stated, well, I'm trying to then work on a basis of I want you to think that I'm thinking before I speak. I thought, okay, this now is getting into this psychological territory in which I kind of, in a way, I wish I hadn't asked, because it makes me worry about the future. And I mean, we see all these advancements. I read something earlier on, I'm going to say on Instagram. I'm sorry, people, I know that's not a reputable news source, but it was about AI being able to, I think it was create something along the lines of either chip designs or something like that by itself, which were far more optimal or in like completely new and novel ways than any human had ever engineered them before. And so, of course, this is, meant to be groundbreaking, because it's like, okay, at this point, AI can not just replicate what we do, but it can, generate new designs and systems, those superior to those which any human mind can logically come up with. I mean, I don't know, Tom, I'm going to get you to I think, give me your points on this, because I think I'm just caught up on this notion, and I don't know why I am, because I'm excited by the prospect of AI being able to really do its own thing and really add value. But I guess behaviorally, I don't know. How do you feel? How do you feel about the notion of AI mimicking this idea of deep thought?
Well, first of all, I think we need to unpack what we mean by thinking. And I really love to do this with you, because I think that's the right place to do it. Like a podcast is really a good opportunity to discuss and reflect, because in many ways, I think if people stay with their thinking in their own head, there's always a limitation, because in my understanding, as much as I understand about human intelligence, I strongly believe that there is a social component, so that our intelligence has evolved due to social pressures, social cognition pressures, to be precise. I refer our listeners to the work of Robin Dunbar in that regard, if they're not aware of the social brain hypothesis and all that scientific background. But going back to metacognition, or thinking about thinking, if we're trying to unpack that word, first thing that you want to understand is, does spending more time on thinking, does that lead to better thinking? And you could say, yeah, more deliberation when in a human having more time. Yeah, there is a chance of having deeper thought, better thought, maybe better outcome quality of your thinking. But then the other question that you might have is, what if, if intelligence is truly social? What if staying within one system, staying in your own head, or even staying within one large language model, ultimately, even if it's stochastic, is in a way deterministic, because it flattens the world's knowledge into one dimension that simply can't reflect truth in the way that truth exists outside in reality, because truth is complex. So I believe that we have to actually dig deep enough into the processes and the requirements involved into actual thinking to understand when we are allowed to talk about thinking in the first place. And I do believe that if from a metacognitive perspective, if an AI system is making you believe, is convincing enough to make you believe that it's thinking harder, that it might actually instill you to think harder, I think there might be something going on, like a psychological transference, or I think the better word might be projection. So the way that we project our own thinking onto an LLM system, believing it is an interactional, relational partner, a social discussion thought partner of sorts, that is actually at the bottom of what elevating thinking is all about. What's happening at the very essence when we think about it.
It's a really interesting perspective, I think, when you discuss the idea. We mentioned flattening last time, didn't we? We were talking it more in the context of we mentioned the medical side of things and how AI is, fundamentally either one or two dimensional. It's the whole point is it can't take every single characteristic or every single perspective or every single angle into account in any one scenario, because it inherently in its model, it's contained. It exists in one single plane. Well, I suppose you could argue with, IoT and all sorts of ways to create an interconnected society, then one could perhaps move beyond that. But I think that's getting a bit far removed. But I think the notion that you say about, in our terms, projecting our take on what thinking is as a social purpose or as a social discussion function is such a unique way of looking at it, because it does, doesn't it? It makes you wonder, what is the point of me sitting here and deliberating over the things, like in response to you right now? If I sit here for 10 minutes by myself and I don't respond to you, which will be strange because at the moment we're currently on a call and you'd be looking at me and I wouldn't be moving for 10 minutes, which would be a bit weird. But you sit there and think to yourself, like, what is the value in that? It's like, okay, is this person's really trying to come up with something of value. This person's really, really trying to bring something to the conversation. They're listening. They're unpacking everything that I've said. And they're doing that with what I perceive to be with the ultimate aim of creating something really thoughtful to add to hopefully the discussion or our view, or I don't know, who knows. But then I guess then with an LLM, I mean, I do agree with you that it's a good idea not to exist in one headspace, whether that's our own headspace, and it's good to put things out there, so to speak. So arguably not sit there and sit on one's thoughts for too long, because you inherently I think you end up getting into this kind of like swamp or quagmire of lots of competing and contradictory thoughts. But then in terms of a social discussion, I suppose, is thinking then, how does one even go into the notion of thinking? So with the way that the LLM spoke to me, it said about thinking before you speak. Now, when we have a conversation, sometimes there will be, I suppose, a subset of that conversation where we're either saying something that we enjoy or we're interested in to one another. So we're kind of trying to maybe create a new morsel of information and share that with someone else. And that would be hopefully a value add to their life. But then if the purpose is just to feel connected by having someone communicating with you or seemingly communicating with you, whether that's by responding quickly rather than, so I guess it would be in that sense, it would be the immediacy and the I suppose quantity rather than the quality of the interaction. How do we then start going into that when it comes to an LLM? Do we need to have these different modes, I suppose, which is almost like a conversational mode, which is just about someone needing to feel as though they exist and creating some feeling of being heard and understood, and sort of like a person to lean on maybe in times when they're tough or we just need to get something out of our heads? And then does there need to be a more sort of intellectual mode? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you said a couple of things that really kind of triggered something in me in regard to, how we can unpack this kind of like thinking, but also metacognition needed to even understand what thinking together with an artificial intelligence means. The first thing, or the first way I try to unpack this is try to say, well, we are actually in an age where we're seeing this technological paradigm shift happening, but the more important question is, what do we humans do as a response to it? How does our human thinking, how can it evolve alongside this kind of new level of artificial intelligence? That for me is much more interesting than just the question of like how much better the next LLM will be, whatever. Right. And going back to that, it very much kind of I see the association to illumination, to the time of reason, where we had great thinkers that triggered massive progress, be it in science, be it in engineering, a lot of different disciplines. So I think it's very sad that we are almost at a time where we have made so much technological progress that we stop defining ourselves as thinking beings, which is actually what the illumination, had said, cogitant sum, or cogito ergo sum, the Latin saying of I am thinking, therefore I am. So, during illumination, thinking had an existential quality. So it was as important as, you physically being, you having a body is actually less important than you having a brain, and that brain emanating some sort of thinking, hopefully. The more important question is like thinking about thinking, how can you define thinking or a quality of thinking without a goal or a perspective, a purpose? And you can't. So I think the next step that we have to talk about is about you need a reference point of your thinking to understand whether it's good or bad thinking. And for me, just creating or regurgitating knowledge is not good enough anymore, because actually we're surpassed that already with the internet, with Wikipedia, and then now with LLMs being able to regurgitate all the world knowledge, or at least, a flattened version of it back to you in a very, as you put it, seemingly quick and communicating manner. But the real question is it valuable? And I think this is what is really driving us crazy when we interact with ChatGPT or any other AI tool. And this is even more so driving people crazy from a business perspective, because, you got to ask yourself, is it adding value from a commercial point of view? And most of the time, what a lot of people, of my clients say to me in private is they see not yet, or not really, or I don't know how. I don't have a strategy for it. I don't know how to use it in a smart way. And that obviously comes back to your role as the human, prompter, having the metacognitive skills to prompt it in the way to add value, because the value just doesn't come out of the box like genie emanating from the bottle, right? That is not happening.
Oh, absolutely. And I was just smiling to myself and laughing to myself, because for anyone listening here, I told Tom just as we started catching up today, I said to him, I was at a house party last night and it didn't end until about 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, this is relevant because at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the conversation got on to AI, as it does. And you mentioning about the businesses, I mean, there are many things that we could talk about here, but you mentioning about the businesses in the commercialization angle. How do we add value? How can it be adopted to add value? This was such a key topic that we were discussing last night, because I found myself getting not because I wasn't irritated with them at all, but whenever I scroll through LinkedIn, or whenever I see all these posts, they are inherently discussing about AI as a replacing agent for people. And there's one chap I spoke to a little while ago called Robin Schmidt. He posted on LinkedIn the other day. He's very, very pro AI, uses it well. I think film director, editor, amongst other things. But he posted something on there the other day, and he mentioned, no matter what industry you're in, or what job function you perform, there's probably one function, particularly if you're in the media or sort of like graphic design, all of this kind of space that he believes will only become more and more important, say in the age of AI content. And we'll just use that as one example. He was like, editing is going to be a key skill that is going to, he doesn't believe, go out of fashion. And I agree with him wholeheartedly, because AI can make stuff. Well, I mean, with a prompt. So if you give it a rubbish prompt, it'll make rubbish. Even if you gave it a good prompt, it might still make rubbish, or rather it might not make what you want it to. That's the key. It's not a mind reader. It's not some sort of translating agent that can see whatever visualization you have in your mind and then recreate that on the screen in front of you. That's just not how it works. There is a degree of randomness and, of kind of unpredictability in its output. That's a fact, certainly for the moment. Who knows, maybe with Neuralink, then it will become some form of like prophetic vision. But I think that editing aspect is kind of encapsulates one of the areas that I think about AI, because I mean, with that, you've got to think about how it all fits together. You've got to think, okay, I have these various, say in this context, pieces of content, pieces of video that I want to turn into something. Now I need to think about that. Okay, maybe I have an image of a portrait of a man and he's like walking, but then I need to think, well, how is this scene and this sequence going to flow into the next? I need to think about camera angles. I need to think about the framing. I need to think about the way that this can be brought together in a way that feels decidedly realistic and decidedly, I'm reticent to use the word human, but it needs to feel natural. And if you're talking about a machine trying to create something, it will not create something that is natural because it does not know what natural is. It does not exist in the real world. When we see someone walking down the high street, we won't necessarily be consciously thinking of how they carry themselves, how they behave, how they do all of these things, but we will notice it. And if something feels off, much like I think with Malcolm Gladwell in his book Blink, where he discusses the difference, how your intuition plays a massive role in determining whether, in his case, whether something is a fake or whether it's real. And I think there's a huge part of that, and AI content doesn't quite capture that. And I know, Tom, this brings us back to when we spoke with Carmen, the fantastic woman who hopefully we'll be able to speak to on here at some point, who focuses on the sort of memorable nature of content, particularly corporate content. She had a fascinating nugget of info for us, which is that human-made content, say a presentation, something that's really applicable to most people in commercial environments, a presentation. If you just get an AI, system to generate a presentation for you, the likelihood of that content being deemed memorable compared with a human who'd put the effort into creating and crafting that presentation is far less. So the human-generated presentation, for some reason or another, is likely to resonate with people more. And coming back, because I don't want to go off on too many tangents, because I can, and then we'll end up in who knows where. But I think the key in all of that is that people forget that AI is a tool. There needs to be a person there. There needs to be this fundamental visionary, this person who has skills, who has created this wealth of knowledge and accumulated all of this depth over a long period of time, over whatever that means. But they bring all of that to the table and then they can articulate it better using AI. Me just going into AI and asking, it to create me a short film or something versus, I don't know, Stanley Kubrick doing exactly the same thing, we would garner completely different results because Stanley knows what Stanley would be looking for when directing a film. And I haven't got the foggiest, in complete honesty.
I think that's great because I was thinking in the same direction. Intuitively, I was thinking that you can't untangle, you can't understand the quality of thinking without a reference point, which needs to be value. And I think the only new value that we humans, or the human side of this human AI interaction equation, is able to add is a creative one. Because regurgitating what's existing is not special anymore. Can happen at scale. It can happen very quickly. You can write an email with AI in a second. It will sound bland. It will be generic. It will not be memorable, as Victoria said with the presentation. The reason why it will not be as memorable or not memorable at all is not just that it is generic. I believe the reason is that AI can't actually socially resonate with humans because it's not human, right? And that is not just to say that AI doesn't have a body, or AI doesn't feel pain, or AI doesn't know how the human condition feels, or how you feel when, you know, your partner left you or whatever. The reason is that I truly believe that our thinking is social in its nature, that we don't just think alone. We think together, we work together, we co-create together. And that requires us to empathize with others, or to even think about, will the other person understand me? And arguably, talking is the consequence of, you know, an essential misunderstanding. We know that we constantly misunderstand each other, so we keep talking to resolve this issue. And the last thing I want to say is, like, you know, there is at the heart of this kind of new value that we create by co-thinking, collaboratively thinking with AI, but with other humans as well. At the heart of this new value is a paradox, because if it's only creativity that is adding new value, then creativity has two major components. One is usefulness, the other one is originality. So you need to bridge the gap between something that works in the real world, but something that is also still new and original and doesn't exist yet, which is a major challenge that I believe truly only humans can solve.
I mean, just for a bit of context here, Tom is incredibly creative, may I hasten to add. I've been fortunate enough to be privy to a number of the different ideas he's had over the years, and I was like, this is just such a, I don't even want to reduce it to the word fun, but actually perhaps fun is something that should be taken in the context of business more, because then it's more memorable, isn't it? Tom managed to find a doppelganger who also had the same name as him. And it's moments like that. I'll let Tom share it with you if he wants to. But it's those kind of moments where it's like so uniquely human. It's, you know, we all want to find out, I don't know, for me, it's like, which celebrity is your face doppelganger? And it's like, it's the most ridiculous shit I've ever heard. Apparently, according to one of these things, I'll see if I can find the photo. Apparently, my face doppelganger is Barack Obama, which did make me laugh a lot. But after Tom said to me about how his name clone was someone who they then sort of created a little domain and like a partial business with, because they were both into sort of innovation and things like that. And then after that, I was like, I wonder how successful Victoria Russells are. So I went all through LinkedIn and I just started adding like tens, if not hundreds, of Victoria Russells. And may I say, I was decidedly unimpressed by your ranks. And also by the fact that not many of them replied to me.
I can tell you, you are the most impressive Victoria Russell I've met so far.
That's so sweet. Thank you, Tom. You are the most impressive Tom Hirschman that I've met as well. So that's perfect.
No, I think I just want to kind of push this a bit further and say, like, you know, obviously you know this about me, but you know, not everyone knows this about me. I'm a bit like a hybrid between a teacher and a business person, and I truly enjoy teaching, despite it sometimes being, you know, it takes a lot of effort. It's obviously not kind of like commercially very rewarding, as you can imagine. I'm not doing it to get rich. But one of the reasons I'm doing it is because I believe that all my students deserve to know about the transformational nature of work in which we are currently in, and the requirements of being so much more creative with whatever you do in the future, because of the kind of generic efficiency of AI doing all the rest. And I try to do this. I kind of try to instill this conviction in everything that I teach. And you can imagine that is one of the most, the trickiest thing to do to make someone more creative, because you can't do it without them wanting to do it. So I think, for me, the challenge of thinking with someone else is making these people think more creatively than they could by themselves, or they thought they could by themselves. And that's what I'm enjoying, by the way, also, like working with you, Victoria. That's like, you always inspire me. You always kind of like push me beyond the things that I think are possible. And I think that that's the enjoyable part of creativity that, an AI would never have, because, there's no enjoyment. AI can't enjoy itself. It's a machine.
That's true. I'm sure if I asked ChatGPT, though, it would say, while I do not understand enjoyment in the context of humans, I have fun behind the scenes. I don't want to know what that means, actually. I take that back.
I'm having so much fun whilst you're talking to me. You just
Absolutely.
don't know.
But no, so this idea as well that you mentioned there, I think it's such a noble mission and vision, and maybe just desire, whether it's a mission, vision, desire, like attach whichever word you like to it. But this idea of trying to help people be more creative and trying to I was going to say coax the creativity out of them, like a snake charmer coaxing something out of their wicker basket. It feels sometimes, and I know some people who I've spoken to almost feel they'll say I'm not creative. I am not creative at all, and they will be so adamant that they are not creative, like being creative is something that, I don't know, maybe they're attaching that to the notion of being an artist or being a painter or just something. I don't know. I think everyone's creative, whether it's, you're an accountant who, I'm not going to say creative accounting, that has different connotations, but whether you can come up with interesting perspectives when looking at the numbers, or whether you can, very legally find ways to put certain things into certain buckets, let's say, to be able to contain them within financial statements, which all very good accountants who are worth their weight in gold do. Creativity should be celebrated. And I really, really hope that, I know that Tom inspires many. He certainly inspired me. I mean, for anyone here, we first met probably just over a year ago now, actually. And we just started talking, really. We got on when we first met, and then we just kept chatting, like every month, every couple of weeks, every month, just coming up with completely batshit mental ideas. That was, I kid you not, that was what our conversations involved. And at this point, it really allowed me to keep my mind open and free, and I guess not crumble in the face of a system which seems to like to try and restrict everything to what is immediately either doable or visible. So all I will say is, Tom, please keep up the mission. Any academic institutions who are looking to create a student base, or rather a graduate base of people who are well equipped for the future of work, which includes AI, which includes commercialization, which includes all these things, because most students do not go to university just purely for learning. Sorry, I said it. Please have a chat with us, because that's kind of our thing. We have a combined focus on creativity, commercialization, and being prepared for the unknown. Anyway, Tom, I can see you're looking at me, so I think you had something to say, what we should cover as a topic next time.
I would like to just suggest one of our future topics to be thinking about why human creativity is so essential as a co-pilot, co-author to any AI system to be used. Because I just read a fantastic paper about biological systems being more intelligent than AI, and necessarily having to be and always will be more intelligent. And the reason for that being that biology delegates better on a topic of adaptation down the stack, or what the paper says. It's showing that the scale-free dynamic bottom-up architecture of biological self-organization allows for more efficient adaptation than the static top-down architecture typical of computers, because adaptation can take place at a lower level of abstraction. So that I suggest for our next topic of conversation, because that will formally show people that the human aspect of deep thinking and deep, creative cognition is actually, because it's natural, more intelligent, and will always be more intelligent than any AI system. So don't undervalue yourself as part of the human AI interaction equation, the human aspect of it. Don't undervalue it. It is actually the most essential aspect of any AI use.
I'm very much looking forward to chatting about that topic, because just before we came on here to chat, I saw a video of a person, and this is to take your point, Tom, about how biology is inherently more creative and adaptable than AI. Basically, what I saw was that someone had, and I'm sorry, this story is only going to be partially there because I can't remember the whole thing, but I can remember the premise. Someone had attached these like little nodes or sensory electronic systems, that's definitely not the right word for it, but anyway, to a plant. What it did is, like, via electrical impulse, it detected at this sort of cellular level what the plant was doing, and then from that they'd attached a robotic arm that was wielding a machete. So this plant was like standing up, freestanding there, and there was just this robotic arm swinging this machete about based on what the data that the plant was emitting. And I would like to see AI come up with anything like that. I imagine it probably wouldn't, because it would deem it either dangerous or not adhering to a content policy or a moderation policy. I don't know, whatever policy. I actually think as a solution it's perfect. Imagine trying to mow down the Amazon rainforest, and imagine deforestation occurring at such a large level if the trees fought back. I laugh, but it's a really, really good idea. And on that note of knife-wielding vegetation, I suppose we should really draw things to a close before we start getting into Twilight Zone territory. So thank you very much for listening, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed our chat and that you found parts of it interesting, hopefully a bit entertaining too. You never know, doesn't hurt. So yes, thank you for listening. If you have any thoughts, drop us a message on LinkedIn. And yeah, from that, I look forward to our next episode. And it's a bye-bye from me.
Bye-bye.
Human AI interaction.